In a dimly lit room, a young man sits before his computer, contemplating a thought he believes is universal. His screen displays a scene from a video game, and he muses on a peculiar observation, that in this game, the mothers of the main characters are undeniably more captivating than the heroines themselves. Suddenly, the world seems to shift. A woman's voice cuts through, addressing someone named Ray. She confirms his identity, stating that her daughter has told her about it. She introduces herself as Maniana, extending a hand with a confident smile. It is, she says, a pleasure to finally meet him. A rapid sequence of moments flashes by. Maniana, graceful and deadly in a sword duel, lets out a soft laugh, complimenting her opponent on their impressive skill. Another image follows. Maniana in a shower, startled, yet a playful smile crosses her lips as she calls someone a naughty boy. The montage concludes with a blur of violent, indistinct motion. The final scene is one of pure tragedy. Maniana lies defeated, tears streaming down her bruised face as she sobs an apology for being a bad mom. Nearby, a fist slams down beside a keyboard. Back in his room, Ray's face is a mask of horror and disgust. He can only whisper how awful the entire ordeal was. His phone suddenly beeps, displaying a notification, a text from the game's management team. Clutching his head, he screams in anguish, unable to comprehend why such a beloved character had to die. He stared at the message on his phone, a surge of hope rising within him. He wondered aloud if the game developers had finally accepted his request and created a story route where the mothers could be saved. His hope was instantly shattered. With a cry of frustration, he slammed his head onto his desk. It wasn't a new story route. It was just another event for the main heroines, who already had their happy endings. This was the world of an average corporate drone, whose primary hobby was playing these sorts of browser games. Tears of genuine sorrow streamed down his face as he pleaded with the indifferent developers. He begged them to give him a break, questioning how long they would continue to ignore the mothers. He was, after all, a great admirer of the heroines' mothers. The game in question was Magia Fantasia, also known as Mama Fan. It was a typical fantasy story set in an academy, filled with swords and magic. Despite being an adult-oriented game with content for hardcore players, its role-playing elements had garnered significant praise. The heroines, each with their own distinct and different personalities, were certainly one of the game's charms. But what truly made the game stand out was something else entirely. Its main draw was the awesome cast of moms. These charming older women, despite being mere supporting characters without their own dedicated story routes, were the true focus for a passionate segment of the player base. However, a terrible fate awaited most of them. They were brutally murdered, poisoned, attacked by dogs, or captured by powerful villains and subjected to torture. Many died while trying to save the protagonist, meeting one tragic end after another. In stark contrast to their grim fates, the game's protagonist, Ray, would simply risk his life to protect the young heroines. After a mother's lackluster death, he would vow not to let anyone hurt his partners, declaring that they had no choice but to move forward. Back at his desk, Ray seethed with anger. He couldn't understand why the protagonist wasn't a deacon for the moms. He knew a huge number of players, himself included, had sent requests for a mom route to the developers, but they had all been ignored. The game remained popular, but its fanbase seemed dominated by those obsessed with the high school girl heroines, a sentiment he found utterly baffling. He sat before his computer, seething with frustration. It felt as though everyone, from the game's developers to its own hero, was forsaking the mothers. A dark resolve settled over him. If he were the protagonist, he would have done everything in his power to save them. But with the game finished, he sighed and resigned himself to the mundane. It was time to go to work. As he descended an outdoor staircase, his foot slipped and his step sent him tumbling. He let out a cry, but instead of hard ground, he landed with a soft thud on a plush bed, finding himself in a grand hall, utterly bewildered. He sat up, his head spinning. He wondered where he was, questioning if he had truly fallen down the stairs. The opulent, Western-style mansion felt strangely familiar, a place he felt he had seen before. His eyes scanned the room and fixed on a portrait hanging on the wall. A flicker of recognition sparked within him, quickly followed by a dawning sense of dread. The truth began to crash down on him. He scrambled back, his mind reeling. It couldn't be possible. He was inside the game. As this impossible reality set in, the door swung open. A woman rushed in, her expression laced with concern. She explained that she had heard his loud screams and asked if he was all right, calling him by the name Demonio. He stared at her, a jolt of pure shock coursing through him. He knew who she was. The woman before him was Rosa, one of the game's tragic mothers. He remembered her story, how she would choose to stand by her son, Demonio, her single most precious son, even if the entire world became her enemy. She stood before him in an ornate room, confirming his deepest suspicion. He was truly inside the world of the game, and this woman was one of its characters. This realization didn't bring fear, but a surge of excitement. He clenched his fist, thrilled at the thought of being transported into Mama Fan, the very game he had been playing. His excitement faltered as a crucial detail surfaced in his memory. He turned toward an ornate mirror, recalling that Rosa had just called him Demonio. The woman watched him, a puzzled expression on her face. The reflection confirmed his dawning horror. The face staring back was not his own. A cold dread washed over him as he realized this was the last person he ever wanted to be. This was very, very bad. Memories of the character he now inhabited flooded his mind. Demonio Tridal, an arrogant and callous aristocrat. Though his magic skills were first-rate, he was a typical villainous brat who picked a fight with the protagonist only to be swiftly defeated. His path of arrogance always led to the same conclusion. After his defeat, Demonio would succumb to forbidden magic, lose control, and meet a grisly death. It was an unavoidable fate. The weight of this knowledge sent a fresh wave of panic through him. He had finally come to the world of manhwa, only to be damned with a bad end. His panic was interrupted by a gentle voice. Rosa approached, her expression filled with concern. She asked if he was all right, noting that he looked very pale. Her presence was unexpectedly soothing. Her name echoed in his mind, along with her in-game history. Rosa Tridal, Demonio's stepmother. She was a secondary character who didn't feature much in the main story. Despite her limited role, he knew she was extremely popular with a certain subset of players, himself included. She looked away, apologizing for having entered his room without knocking. She then explained the reason for her sudden appearance, her expression laced with worry. She had heard his scream and grew concerned, admitting that perhaps her intrusion had been out of line. She appeared quite frightened. Standing before her, Demonio registered her unease. He watched as she let out a soft, hesitant sound, his brow furrowing in confusion. She then broke into a warm smile, waving a hand dismissively. She insisted that what happened was completely her fault and that he need not worry about the welt on her face. Her gentle words triggered a violent flash of memory. He saw the original Demonio striking her down, accusing her of being a filthy when she was only after his father's money. The realization struck him with force. These were the memories of the body he now inhabited. The memories continued to surface, revealing the plot's backstory. After losing his beloved mother at a young age, Demonio had coped by hating Rosa with every fiber of his being, as evidenced by a memory of him contemptuously pouring a drink over her head. Despite his constant abuse, Rosa had never wavered, always showing him the unconditional love of a mother. However, this devotion led to a tragic end. In a vision of the game's final battle, after Demonio had fallen to darkness, Rosa placed herself between him and the protagonist, putting her life on the line to protect her son-in-law. Her plea was met with pure malice. The corrupted Demonio, his face twisted into a sadistic grin, ran her through with a blade, snarling at her not to get in his way. He trembled as the vision concluded with the image of her bleeding out on the cold floor. This was the inevitable ending Rosa met in every single path of the game's story. The weight of this future knowledge crashed down on him. He seized Rosa's hands, his voice filled with anguish as he apologized. He lamented that the original Demonio was a piece of filth, expressing his deep regret for everything that had been done to her and his fear that she might be scarred. He scrambles for an explanation, awkwardly suggesting his prior hostility was just a typical rebellious phase. With a nervous smile, he claims that in truth, he only ever wanted to get closer to her, calling her Mom Rosa. Stunned by the sudden shift in address, she can only repeat the words back in disbelief. Mom. Rosa. Internally, he panics, realizing he called her mom out of habit from his previous life playing the game. He curses his mistake and blurts out an apology, worried that he has made her uncomfortable, but Rosa simply looks down, lost in thought. To his utter shock, her face lights up, and she rushes towards him, joyfully exclaiming how happy she is. She throws her arms around him in a tight embrace, tears of joy streaming down her face. She tells him he has finally acknowledged her as his mother, while he can only stammer her name in surprise. He remains stiff and bewildered as she holds him close, a look of pure bliss on her face. As she pulls back slightly, his mind races, overwhelmed by the sudden physical contact. Composing herself, Rosa smiles warmly and asks him to call her mom, often from now on. She reassures him, saying she understands and always knew he was a nice boy deep down. She suggests that there's no need to rush things. They can build their bond as a family slowly from this day forward. With a final, cheerful farewell, she turns and exits the room, leaving him alone as the door clicks shut. He stands alone in his room, the recent interaction with Rosa replaying in his mind. A blush creeps across his face as he thinks about how cute she is, followed by a pang of sorrow at the thought that such an adorable, kind person was fated to die without her goodness ever being truly acknowledged. His thoughts race. It wasn't just her. He suddenly recalls a critical detail from the game. It was Demonio himself who killed Rosa in Manhwa. This grim fact sparks a new, defiant idea. If he tries hard enough, perhaps his mother, Rosa, won't have to die. This realization fills him with a surge of manic energy. A wide, determined grin spreads across his face as he looks down at his own hands, wondering if he truly has the power to save all the mothers who were never given a chance to live in the original story. The world he now inhabited was known as Magia Fantasia, or more colloquially, Manhwa. In that world story, while the protagonist saved the main heroines from their merciless destinies, there were other, overlooked heroines who were not so fortunate. His eyes narrow with intense focus. He understands that in order to save the mothers, he needs one thing above all else: power. He knows he needs the kind of power that can defeat any foe, overcome any adversity, and ultimately change the very trajectory of the story itself. Fortunately, while the original Demonio was an undeniable jerk, his talent was genuine. And as a high-ranking noble, he has both money and influence at his disposal. He throws himself into his studies, poring over books by candlelight. He reasons that if he trains as if his life depends on it and actively avoids the path of the villain, he can achieve his goal. Out in a clearing, he begins his physical and magical training, dark energy already beginning to swirl around him. With a confident smirk, he makes a decision. He will let the game's protagonist handle saving the heroines. His own mission is different. He unleashes a torrent of dark power, certain that by following this path, he will obtain the incredible strength he needs. He reaches forward, dark energy coiling around his outstretched hand. With a look of fierce, almost manic determination, he makes a bold declaration, a vow that sets him apart from the game's original hero. He proclaims that he, on the other hand, will save all the mothers of this world. Behind him, spectral images of Maniana and other matriarchs appear, solidifying his newfound purpose. The Tridal peacekeeping unit faces a monstrous wild bear, its maw dripping as it lets out a deafening roar. The soldiers realize with dread that the beast is far larger than their reports indicated, questioning if they even stand a chance. Stepping before them, Lord Demonio raises a hand, calmly ordering them to stand back. He wastes no time. With a swift gesture, Demonio unleashes an intermediate spell, Black Dance. A whip of pure dark energy erupts from his hand, striking the bear with immense force and sending it hurtling backward through the air. The soldiers stare in disbelief, amazed that he took the beast out in a single strike. They marvel that their master would personally come to handle such a creature. Demonio, however, has his own motivation. He needs to finish the job quickly so he can go praise Rosa. He reflects that 3 months have passed since his reincarnation into the body of the villainous noble. His actions have not gone unnoticed back at the estate. From the Grand Mansion, whispers circulate among the staff that Lord Demonio has been treating the servants differently as of late, no longer like mere cattle. The gossip continues as 2 maids push a cart. One recalls how he even helped her a while ago, while the other notes that he seems to be training hard, having gone out of his way to subdue a beast. Nearby, a male servant overhears and blushes, admitting to himself that this change feels nice. Inside his stately office, Demonio sits behind his desk, hands steepled in thought. Rosa stands behind him, a faint smile on her lips as she observes him, thinking to herself that he has become a respectable man. The reason for his new focus is clear. With the current head of the house, Glenn, regularly away from the mansion, his son Demonio has taken on the duties of acting head. He is seen here, concluding a business meeting, confirming that they have a deal. As the meeting ends, he turns to Rosa, handing her a folded document. He instructs her to put it in the safe. She accepts the document with a simple yes. Bowing slightly, she informs him that she will excuse herself to carry out the task. The important document is then carefully placed within the heavy steel confines of the safe. Within the Tridal mansion, a business meeting is underway, the tension masked by opulent surroundings. One of the family's associates, a portly man with a smug grin, addresses Demonio directly, a dismissive tone in his voice. That will not do, Lord Demonio. He then turns his attention to Rosa, who is reviewing a document with a worried expression. The associate questions the wisdom of handing a contract over to her, insinuating that she might simply run off with the family's fortune. His companion joins in the slander, crudely suggesting that Rosa seduced Lord Glenn with her body. They sneer, remarking that her skills as a woman must be something else entirely, and that they would like to see those skills used on them. From across the room, Demonio observes, his face a mask of cold fury. He knows Rosa comes from a fallen, impoverished noble family, a fact that makes her an easy target for such scorn. The strain is visible on Rosa's face as she forces a pained smile. The associate continues his torment, reminding her that since marrying into the Glenn family as the second wife, she has been branded a gold digger. He notes that the constant insults have clearly taken a toll on her, yet he beckons her closer, feigning concern. His words finally break through Demonio's restraint. A sharp crack echoes as he clenches his fist, his knuckles white. He thinks back to his previous life. Before he was reincarnated, no one but the original Demonio had ever treated her this way. He internally seethes at the filthy wench, furious that they only care about his father's money. His rage intensifies as he thinks of the woman they are insulting. To him, Mom Rosa is a wonderful person, dignified, charming, and full of love. His eyes glow with protective fury. His fury erupts into action. He slams his hands on the table, startling the 2 associates. One looks on in disbelief, whispering to the other if Demonio really just called her mom with such a terrifying expression. He rises to his feet, dark energy swirling around him like a shroud. He declares that seeing them disrespect his mother to his face means they have no further need for their necks. His shadowy power constricts around the 2 terrified men, lifting them into the air as they gasp and choke. With glowing eyes, he issues a final chilling command. Now, get out of my sight. As the commotion echoes through the grand hall, 2 onlookers flee in terror. One shouts in confusion, questioning what just happened, as he believed Lord Demonio was supposed to loathe his stepmother. Back in the study, Rosa gently chides Demonio for his outburst. She reminds him that as the next head of the house, he should not allow himself to become so emotional. He immediately shrinks back, looking small and contrite as he apologizes. He explains that he simply got angry when he saw them disrespecting her. Rosa's hand reaches out towards him. She pulls him into a warm embrace, her expression soft and understanding. With a gentle smile, she calls him a bad boy and asks what he hopes to achieve by making his mother so happy. He buries his face in her chest, a blush spreading across his cheeks. He realizes with a jolt that he is on very good terms with his stepmother and internally confesses his wish to flirt with her for the rest of his life. His thoughts drift to the original purpose of the game. He recalls his duty to save all the mothers of that world, a mission that requires him to gain more and more power. He remembers the grim fate that awaits his character. At the end of a certain quest, Demonio is set on a one-way path to ruin and desolation, a future represented by crumbling, ancient ruins under a lonely moon. But there's a way to change that destiny. He recalls a subquest, one that doesn't affect the main story but rewards the player with a very rare weapon, the Glenn family treasure. With his face still buried in her chest, he resolves to do everything in his power to get his hands on it, all in order to save his mom. Demonio tried all sprints through the corridors of a hidden dungeon, his mind set on acquiring a rare weapon. He navigates from memory, recalling the precise sequence of actions needed. A right turn, then a left, followed by the destruction of a specific statue. He continues onward, deliberately ignoring a room filled with gargoyle statues, knowing they are a distraction from his true path. Pausing for a moment, he leans against the stone wall, reaffirming his strategy. This dungeon appears near the end of the game, but he has the entire route memorized. His plan is to pick only the correct paths, avoiding all monster encounters to reach the deepest level efficiently. His thoughts drift back to his previous life as Ray, hunched over a computer screen, frustrated. He knew the game by heart, a maddening obsession. He recalls messing up and realizes that relying on a save point now would be the same as admitting he had lost the game back then. Returning to the present, Demonio stands before a massive, final gate, his progress thus far having gone exactly as planned. He enters a vast, pillared hall. Suspended high in the air by thick chains is his prize, a formidable dark blade. This is the demon's sword, Despena, a weapon capable of exponentially strengthening its wielder's dark magic. He recalls, however, that despite being a rare weapon in the game, it was practically unusable for him then. He had possessed an all-rounder weapon that boosted all his magical attributes. With a surge of power, he reaches out and grasps the hilt, shattering the chains. He knows this sword will be a perfect fit for him now. As the last link breaks, a swirling vortex of darkness begins to form, revealing the final task. The darkness coalesces into a massive, grinning creature, the guardian of the treasure. To claim his prize, he must defeat this guy. The monstrous entity loomed before Demonio, its wide grin a silent threat. Despite the creature's intimidating presence, Demonio stood his ground, sword in hand. He calmed himself with the knowledge that this was the fierce guardian of Despena, and he already knew all of its attack patterns. His confidence was immediately tested as the guardian lashed out with a massive tentacle. The appendage slammed into the stone floor with incredible force, shattering the ground where he had been standing just a moment before. He narrowly avoided the blow, a swirling shadow barrier absorbing the impact. A smirk crossed his face as he acknowledged the close call. Had his barrier been even a second slower, he would have been annihilated. The near-death experience served as a stark reminder that game knowledge alone wouldn't guarantee an easy victory. A further complication arose as he realized he couldn't see the creature's health bar. Despite the disadvantages, he hardened his resolve, recalling the vow he had made to himself. His vow was to protect the mamas he had grown to love in this new world. He analyzed his opponent, recognizing the difficult matchup. The guardian skin was incredibly tough, highly resistant to both physical and magical attacks. Worse, with the creature clinging to the ceiling, his own attacks could barely reach it. He was forced onto the defensive, skillfully dodging a barrage of sharp projectiles. His strong aptitude for black magic, particularly spells that controlled shadows, was on full display, lending him a distinctly villainous air. This villainous power was a familiar tool. In the game, Demonio had been a genius, but also a vicious and arrogant man. His greatest weapon had been his flawless proficiency in magic power manipulation, an exceptional skill he now resolved to put to good use. He watched the guardian, waiting for the perfect moment. He knew his opportunity would come just after the creature finished its next tentacle attack. The moment arrived as the guardian opened its maw to launch a poison breath attack. Recognizing this as his only chance, Demonio prepared to unleash all of his magic, focusing his aim with absolute precision. He unleashed his full power, roaring the name of the spell, Black Lance. A concentrated spear of dark energy shot forth, striking the guardian directly in its eye through its open mouth, causing the beast to cry out in agony. Its sole weakness, the eye hidden deep within its maw, was struck true. Demonio had used his spells and mana manipulation to compress his energy into a long, narrow strip, piercing the guardian's vital point. As the creature dissolved, Demonio found himself holding an ornate, demonic sword. He reflected that its power output had increased significantly, crediting the weapon, Despena, for taking the guardian out in a single strike. He celebrated his success, overjoyed that he had not only acquired a powerful weapon, but had also cleared the dungeon. With renewed determination, he declared that this was another step toward saving his beloved mother. His triumphant moment was interrupted by the sound of a woman's laughter. A figure materialized before him, stating her curiosity had been piqued as her seal had been broken for the first time in ages. With an amused smirk, she noted that her new master was a mama's boy. He stared, utterly bewildered by her sudden appearance and words. The question echoed in his mind. Who was she? After clearing the dungeon, Demonio tried all examines his reward, a menacing, ornate sword named Paya. He is pleased to have acquired it without serious injury, but reflects that he certainly didn't expect the nuisance that came along with it. He decides to wash up before doing anything else, noting with interest that while this world has a Middle Ages feel, it still has modern conveniences like showers. With that thought, he heads for the bathroom. As he opens the door, a woman inside, Rosa, lets out a startled cry, caught completely by surprise while bathing. He freezes in the doorway, his face flushing red at the unexpected sight. The grand mansion stands silent under the night sky, the earlier awkwardness hanging in the air. Sometime later, Demonio and Rosa sit across from each other at a small table, a heavy silence filling the room. Breaking the quiet, Demonio bows his head, blushing as he apologizes profusely. He insists it's all right, admitting it was his fault for not locking the door. She counters, equally flustered, saying she should be the one apologizing for showing him something so unseemly. As she speaks, Demonio has a realization. He expected her to be furious, but her humble reaction is incredibly cute. He recognizes this as the very essence of her charm. She continues her self-deprecation, her hands clasped nervously. She doubts he was pleased by the sight, calling herself an old lady whose body isn't much to look at. His internal thoughts flare with intensity. He sees through her words, realizing she's being cunning by trying to downplay her appeal, yet this only makes her more precious to him. To Demonio, she is simply adorable. He sits across from Rosa, who playfully calls him a sweet talker. Internally, however, he dismisses any notion of her being an old lady, instead believing she is far more beautiful than the average young woman. A brief, quiet moment passes between them in the well-appointed room. Her gaze then falls upon the ominous sword resting nearby. She expresses her astonishment, finding it incredible that he managed to clear the entire dungeon all by himself. He becomes flustered, laughing awkwardly at the praise. Rosa adds that she has heard it is a particularly challenging dungeon, her expression turning more serious. The weapon is the notorious demon sword, Paya, which controls dark magic. Its power was so unbelievably strong that no one could wield it, forcing the head of the Tridal family to seal it away generations ago. With this knowledge, Rosa clasps her hands and earnestly pleads with him to be careful. He listens, a flicker of surprise on his face as he realizes her explanation is identical to the one from the game he knows. She elaborates on the legend, explaining that the demon sword is said to possess a will of its own, a will that hates its masters and seeks to bring them to ruin. He internally scoffs at the notion, thinking it's surely a jest. But as Rosa looks up in alarm, a young woman with long, light hair materializes from the sword itself, floating playfully in the air. Elsewhere, under the night sky, Demonio walks away from the mansion, unaware of the event unfolding within. The spectral girl, now free, helps herself to a bag of cookies, munching on them with delight and proclaiming how delicious they are. He pauses his walk deep in thought. The appearance of a young girl from Paya was the last thing he expected. He racks his brain, certain that this character never existed in the game he played. He held the strange, demonic blade. Realizing this had been a good lesson. He had mistakenly believed it was just a harmless sword with some ominous text scribbled on it, taking his knowledge of the game for granted. Turning his attention to the girl who had emerged from the sword, he asked what he should call her. She replied that she had no name, inviting him to call her whatever he wished. He considered for a moment, deciding against Deathy, and settling on Paya, a shortened version of Paya. The newly named girl cheerfully accepted. Her cheerful facade dropped instantly. With a menacing glint in her eyes, she revealed it was her first time outside in ages and issued a chilling warning. If he bored her, she would curse him to death. She then challenged him to do his best to entertain her, calling him her mama's boy master. He immediately protested, insisting he was not a mama's boy. Paya, however, was unconvinced, declaring that he definitely had a mother complex and was, in fact, crazy about moms. His demeanor shifted from flustered to fiercely proud. He declared that his love for mothers was nothing pathetic. It was his redeeming quality, and he was proud of it. His intensity seemed to surprise Paya, who realized he was completely serious. Floating beside him in a diminutive form, Paya asked what her master had been occupied with. He looked down at the papers in his hands, his expression resolute, and stated it was time for him to start acting behind the scenes. His plan centered around the Magic Academy. In this world, it was common knowledge that one became a noble at 16 and began their studies there. He recalled that, if he was not mistaken, he would meet many of the mothers he admired once the main story got rolling. However, there was one exception, a particular mother who was one of the strongest characters in the game and an extremely popular heroine. He knew that things had already become serious for her. If he didn't act before the main story's official start, saving her would prove impossible. He resolved then and there to save her from the terrible fate of being trained into submission. Within the world of the game Malmagia Fantasia, there exists a legendary figure, Maniana Velheaven, a magical swordswoman wreathed in lightning. She bears the title Witch of Thunder. She is known as one of the game's heroines and, significantly, as the mother of another character, Monica. Her renown is extensive. She's also counted among the 7 Maggia, a former S-rank adventurer and one of the 7 strongest pillars of the Royal Knight Order, a testament to her immense power. In the game's prologue, she appears as a guest character alongside her daughter, Monica. Following the death of her husband, the two of them are the only family each other has. Despite being widely considered the strongest character in Mal Magia Fantasia, her role is fleeting. She has nothing to do with the main story. She playfully calls out the game's protagonist for staring at her, teasing that she'll tell Monica if he keeps making passes. Even with her limited appearances, her bewitching looks earned her immense popularity. However, her time in the story is short-lived. Mid-game, she suddenly vanishes without a trace. The next time she appears is not in the game, but in the real world, within a ruined structure in the northern part of Tridal's territory. There, a group of bandits complains amongst themselves. They feel it's unfair that their bosses get to have their way with the Witch of Thunder first, but one reminds the others of the promise that they'll get to have their fun with her later, their anticipation palpable. Observing them from above is Despina, who descends silently. Overhearing their crude talk, she muses that being a diligent bandit might not be so bad, considering the divine body they speak of. Her arrival startles Demonio, who watches from the shadows of the trees. She reports her findings to him. The ruins look average, but there are 4 people at the front gate, 3 in the back, and a hidden passage underneath the building. He confirms his suspicions, noting that Maniana's capture by the bandits is unfolding exactly as it did in the game. Despina floats before him, her cheeks puffed out in a triumphant smile as she declares him incredibly useful. He tells her to keep the praise coming and show more gratitude, prompting a chuckle from her. She finds a strange talk of a past life amusing and considers herself fortunate to have been picked up by such an entertaining man. He reflects on his circumstances under the crescent moon. After some experimentation, he has confirmed that Despina, or Paya, is visible only to him. She can be physically touched, can eat for some reason, and can even transform into a flying ball of spirit. Realizing this, he decided it would be best to tell her everything about his past life and his knowledge of the game to secure her cooperation in achieving his goal. She understands his intentions perfectly. Since the woman named Maniana is fated to become the bandit's plaything, she surmises that he would like to save her. Demonio confirms this is exactly his plan. His mind drifts back to the game's original plot. What awaited the protagonist in the enemy hideout was a grim reality. After her initial appearance, Maniana showed radio silence throughout the entire middle portion of the game, only to reappear at the very end. In that story, Maniana had fallen under the bandit's control. To the protagonist's horror, she had been completely tamed and broken into submission, with the magical pattern of her enemy engraved upon her body. Since she was completely loyal to them, the protagonist had no choice but to defeat her. When Maniana came to her senses after the battle, she was filled with remorse. Apologizing for being a terrible mother, she took her last breath as a price for an incantation. After Monica lost her dear mother, the protagonist, Ray, hugged her. They then moved on to the next stage to protect the world. Remembering this outcome, Demonio's voice cuts through the memory, shouting, "Give me a break." The scene shifts to his past life. As a young man, he clutched his head in front of his computer monitor, aghast. He couldn't believe they gave Mama Mania such an awful ending and desperately wondered if there was a route where she could be saved. His face flushed as he clenched his fist. While he found it absolutely unforgivable that she was defiled so early in the game, he had to admit to himself that it was also a bit of a turn-on. Despite his feelings, all of his wishes came to naught. He had frantically begged the game's developers to add a route where she could be saved, but his pleas went unanswered. Returning to the present, Demonio's expression hardens with resolve. He adjusts his glasses, declaring that now is their perfect chance to change things, since the main story has yet to begin. With determination in his eyes, he announces, "We're going to attack." He races forward under the cover of night, a simple mask now covering his face. Despina, floating beside him, questions the purpose of the lame mask, and he explains curtly that it's to hide his identity. She notes his admirable sense of justice, acting without asking for anything in return. He ignores the comment, his mind set on a single goal. He will save her swiftly, without a word, and then leave. To him, this is the best possible outcome. As they approach the bandits' hideout, he confirms the presence of 4 lookouts, just as Despina had reported. She teases him, finding his single-minded devotion to Mama Maniana unsettling. But his focus remains unbroken, his only thought being that as long as Maniana is happy, nothing else matters. Without hesitation, he unleashes his magic. A wave of dark energy erupts from him as he casts Black Slave, instantly binding the 4 lookouts. They freeze in place, unable to move a muscle, their surprise turning to helpless terror. Observing the fallen bandit, Despina analyzes his technique. She recognizes it as fundamental magic, yet its power is on a completely different level. She marvels at the impeccable flow of magic he uses for physical reinforcement, finding it a frightening display for someone still in his early teens. She offers a compliment. "Not bad, master." Dismissing the defeated men as mere lackeys, she tells him it's time to proceed to their underground facility. Demonio stands silently, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. Deep within that very facility, a muscular man with a fur-lined garment and a scar across his eye smirks. He stands before a row of cells, his attention on one in particular. "You cut a gorgeous figure. Maniana, he says with a leer. Inside the cell, Maniana kneels on the stone floor, bound by chains and a collar. Despite her predicament, a defiant smirk plays on her lips. The bandit leader looks on, pleased, remarking that she comes with the full package. In the underground facility, the young man in the academy, uniform, raced through a stone corridor, a thought nagging at him that still made him scratch his head. He couldn't understand it. Maniana was meant to be a very skilled warrior. So how could she have been captured by mere bandits? He continued to sprint, concluding there had to be deep reasons for it. The enemy's top executives had laid the trap and captured her, but they had left the subsequent humiliation to their pawns. A vision appeared before him, showing a man lounging in a chair, identified as the writer Onikichi Ujima. This figure casually explained that it was very important for Maniana to be brought to her knees by low-grade, geezer slimeballs. The protagonist recoiled, realizing it was simply the writer's sick taste. He cared more for erotic scenes than for consistency in the story. He couldn't get it all. Meanwhile, in her cell, the real Maniana struggled against her bonds. She tried to summon her power, but grimaced in frustration, realizing she couldn't use her magic. The bandit leader loomed over her, sneering that she cut a gorgeous figure. He explained that her efforts were futile. The choker around her neck was a special incantation. Once placed, it not only rendered her magic useless, but also prevented her from strengthening her body. He grabbed her chin, adding that this meant she was now nothing more than a mature woman with a large chest. She could only grunt in defiance. He leaned closer, taunting her by guessing that the only thing on her mind was a desperate desire for a man. Maniana flushed, telling him to shut up, but her body's involuntary reaction revealed that the aphrodisiac was working well. He turned to his braided subordinate with a grin, remarking that he was having a blast. He mused that while she might be a mother, he never thought he'd get his way with such a fine woman, and that he had been given permission to do as he pleased as long as she was kept in one piece. He dismisses his subordinate's impatience, declaring that he will be the first to have her. Powerless, Maniana's thoughts turn to her daughter as despair sets in. She whispers an apology, believing her end has come. Her mind drifts to the past, to her deepest desires. She had always wanted to be a strong and proper mother, one who could protect her daughter from all harm and be a source of pride for her late husband. She recalls the difficult path she walked. As a commoner joining the Royal Knights, an order rife with outdated beliefs, she was met with severe discrimination, constantly denigrated and insulted. Despite it all, she pulled through every obstacle with her own skill. For her daughter's sake, she stood her ground against all humiliation, overcoming her loneliness and sadness without relying on anyone. The memory of her hard-won strength makes her current situation unbearable. After everything she had done, she was now to be violated by these lowlives. As the bandit's hand touches her skin, she whispers a final message to her daughter, apologizing for being a terrible mother and declaring her love. But before he can proceed, a flash of steel severs his hand at the wrist. The bandit leader cries out in agony as blood erupts from the wound. He looks up to see a dark-clad figure standing over them, sword drawn. Maniana stares in stunned disbelief. The remaining bandit, enraged and confused, demands to know who the intruder is. The newcomer doesn't waste time with words. He moves in a blur, deflecting the subordinate's attack before striking the injured leader, who curses in pain. The bandit leader, however, is not finished. He turns and flees down the corridor. A small, winged creature appears, alerting the protagonist that the man is escaping with something important, prompting an immediate chase. The bandit leader flees through the stone passage, clutching a dark, spherical object. In the background, the captive Maniana watches in confusion, wondering what is happening. His desperate escape is cut short by a shadowy blur. A blade slices clean through his ankle, sending him tumbling to the ground with a cry of pain. As he writhes on the floor, a figure in a dark, high-collared coat looms over him, holding a jagged blade. The bandit leader frantically insists he's done nothing wrong, claiming he was merely following orders from his superiors and demands to know who his attacker is. He suddenly has an idea, holding up the orb. He explains that with this cursed tool, the woman will be unable to use her power, offering it as a desperate bribe. Prostrating himself on the stone floor, he pushes the orb forward. "Here, it's all yours," he shouts, begging the masked man to spare his life and the lives of his men. The masked man remains silent. A young woman with a winged hairpiece, who has appeared beside him, speaks up, telling him to say something and dismissing the bandit as a sub-third-rate liar. Her words seem to break his concentration. The masked man's face flushes as a thought crosses his mind. Is he now free to have his way with the captive woman? His small, round companion looks on in utter shock. But this momentary lapse is a feint. With a sharp cry, the swordsman swings his blade in a vicious arc, decapitating the bandit and sending the cursed tool flying. He calmly catches the orb. His expression is now cold as he mutters, "You scumbag," before asking what the man took women for. Nearby, his round companion asks the winged girl if the swordsman seemed torn about the offer. She confirms that he did not at all. In a stone cell, with broken shackles lying on the floor, Maniana sits in a state of undress, looking flustered. A masked swordsman appears, draping his dark coat over her shoulders to cover her. She looks up at her rescuer, her face flushed and beaded with sweat, and manages to stammer a quiet thank you. He asks with concern if her captors had harmed her in any way. Maniana reassures him that she is fine and that they didn't get to do anything, breathing a sigh of relief over the close call. Nearby, his small, round companion is starstruck, recognizing her as Mama Mania. She gazes up at him, still blushing, and asks if she might know his name. He dismisses the question, stating his name is not worth mentioning. He suggests she simply think of him as a man who has fallen head over heels for her, a declaration that shocks his floating companion. Without another word, he sweeps her up into his arms. Maniana lets out a startled cry, completely flustered by his actions and words. He tells her to hold on tight as he sprints down a long stone corridor lined with prison cells, carrying her to safety. As he carries her, a profound thought strikes Maniana. She looks at her rescuer's determined face and wonders when the last time was that someone had gone to such lengths to protect her. He brings her to a simple tent pitched in a forest clearing. Setting her down gently, he tells her it is his tent and that she should rest. Maniana apologizes, admitting that her body feels strangely hot. He watches over the resting Maniana, believing she is now safe and that his mission is complete. He resolves to find the right moment to leave once she is asleep, but clutches his chest, acknowledging the immense pain this decision causes his heart. As if sensing his turmoil, Maniana cries out in her sleep. His resolve to leave faltered. Inside the tent, Maniana's eyes fluttered open, a deep blush spreading across her cheeks as she let out a soft, breathy sigh. He found himself above her, struggling against an overwhelming force. He realized with dread that the situation was dire. Her devastating pheromones were causing him to lose all control. His body trembled with the effort, a flush rising to his face as he tried to stammer out a denial, insisting that this was all a misunderstanding. Outside the tent, the round companion floated in the moonlit forest, its eyes wide with shock at the commotion within. It gasped, calling him a beast and marveling that the display was even more impressive than its late husband's. The sounds from the tent continued unabated, and the companion grew impatient. It wailed that it was nowhere near satisfied, wondering aloud how many years it had been overdue and when they would finally finish. As the night wore on, the companion's complaints shifted to a dazed confusion. It felt its mind slipping, becoming dumber and dumber as it lost itself in the sounds echoing from the tent. The sun began to rise, casting its first rays through the trees, yet the activity inside had not ceased. The companion stared in disbelief, its frustration turning into a shouted declaration of profound love and admiration. When the morning light fully filled the tent, Maniana sat up, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. "What have I done?" she whispered, her gaze fixed on the small, newborn-like figure lying peacefully on the bed. Her panicked eyes then shifted to the swordsman, who lay fast asleep beside her. Leaning over him, she quietly asked if he was all right, her voice filled with concern. He stirred, his eyes slowly opening. A look of serene gratitude washed over his face as he brought his hands together, expressing his heartfelt thanks. With tears in her eyes, Maniana apologizes profusely. She admits that while an aphrodisiac played a part, she still holds herself accountable for forcing herself on a young man. Kneeling before him, she confesses that despite him saving her from the bandits, she allowed her lust to take over and did something unforgivable. She bows her head low, promising to do anything to make amends for her actions. Ray simply watches her, considering what he should do now. His internal thoughts, however, are far from troubled. With a confident smirk, he reflects that he enjoyed every single moment. In fact, he feels such gratitude that he would have no problem paying her for the experience. He tells her to please raise her head, conceding that the situation isn't as simple as he's making it sound. He looks at her directly, stating that what happened between them was nothing but an accident and that it doesn't bother him at all. Maniana lets out a startled cry, exclaiming that his casual dismissal won't do. Flustered, she scrambles to put her clothes back on as Ray watches in surprise. Now fully clothed, she correctly identifies him as Demonio, the next head of the Tridal family. She laments what she's done, noting that she has a daughter his age and that he must have hated being forced into such a situation by an older woman. Ray interrupts, telling her there's no need to agonize over it, because on the inside, he's in his 30s. He states firmly that it didn't bother him at all. In fact, he had a stellar time. His bluntness leaves Maniana utterly shocked. He continues, admitting that if anything, he feels ashamed of himself for letting her take the lead and not being more assertive. Maniana quickly refutes his self-criticism, insisting he was more than manly enough, full of energy, and that it felt wonderful. She immediately becomes flustered, trying to take back her words. She insists that this will weigh on her conscience, and that he must let her make it up to him in some way. She addresses him as master, but Ray, still shirtless, insists that her proposed amends are unnecessary. His small, floating companion interjects, suggesting he listen to her and ask for a favor. This, the creature reasons, would put the lust-addled mature woman's mind at ease, a description Ray internally questions. At the grand villa of the Tridal family, he mulls over the idea. Ask her for a favor. Later, on the villa grounds, now fully dressed in his dark coat, he puts the idea into practice. He asks Maniana if she is certain she wants to train him, and she eagerly agrees. He explains that after 2 months of training, he feels he has reached a plateau on his own. He considers her first-rate swordsmanship and magic to be unparalleled, making her the perfect master for him. Maniana listens intently. She accepts his proposal, though she doubts it will be enough to truly make amends. He thanks her, internally celebrating his new master. But Maniana adds a condition, stating that she has never taken a disciple before, having refused countless offers from high-ranking nobles. Without warning, she lunges, her sword striking the ground just inches from his feet. Ray stares, startled by the sudden aggression. The force of the blow sends him stumbling backward. She explains that she can only teach through actual combat, as she has never been able to provide careful tutelage. She asks once more if he is truly prepared for such a violent master. He recalls that in the game, Maniana had a side to her that reveled in battle against strong opponents. A wide, eager grin spreads across his face as he clenches his fist. "Bring it on," he declares. In a courtyard before a grand estate, the masked swordsman clashes with Maniana. He grits his teeth, acknowledging her impressive power. As one of the seven magia, she is on a completely different level from him, and he knows it. In response, she leaps back and unleashes a devastating spell, calling forth a lightning hammer that smashes into the ground with blinding force. He braces for impact, raising a hand as dark energy erupts from the ground to shield him from the electrical onslaught. As their high-speed duel continues, Maniana's thoughts turn to his origins. The Tridal family, she recalls, is an established noble house that has produced highly skilled shadow users for generations. Her mind focuses on Demonio Tridal, the next head of the family. Publicly, he is known as a genius with impeccable magic, yet he acts like typical nobility, showing no mercy to commoners or the weak. An extremely arrogant person, or so people believe. However, Maniana feels he is nothing like the rumors say. Flashing blades with him now, she can feel the pure sincerity in his swordplay, a noble and unwavering will to grow stronger. This sincerity, combined with his actions from the previous day and the intimate moment they shared, causes her to question everything. She wonders if the rumors of him being a scoundrel are just fabrications. The memory sends a wave of heat through her, and she flushes bright red, desperately trying to convince herself that she shouldn't recall such a thing. Her sudden distraction does not go unnoticed. Though confused by her behavior, the swordsman recognizes an opening and decides he won't pass up the chance, hurling his jagged blade through the air. His blade flies true, pinning her shadow to the ground. Maniana recognizes the technique instantly, shadow bind. She smirks, noting that while it's a useful skill for slowing an opponent, it is utterly ineffective against a high-level person like herself. Her confidence suddenly shattered. A jolt ran through her as she realized something was terribly wrong, her eyes widening in disbelief. She tried to step forward, but found herself completely immobilized. Panic began to set in as she discovered her right leg felt as if it were fused to the very ground beneath her. The masked swordsman watched her struggle, the true nature of his technique becoming clear. A standard binding spell would have scattered its power across her entire body. A weak effect she could have easily broken. He, however, had focused the spell's entire binding effect onto that single point, increasing its power exponentially. The realization struck Maniana. He had condensed the magic with incredible precision. This young man's control was astounding. He was in a class of his own. She thought his control over magical power on another level entirely. But as she processed this, he was already moving, unleashing a swirling torrent of dark energy directly towards her while thinking of a promise made to his dear mama. The masked swordsman lunges forward, his jagged blade cutting through the air towards Maniana, who braces for the attack. In response, she unleashes a blinding flash of power, a concussive blast that sends him reeling back in surprise. He tumbles to the ground, losing his grip on his sword, which skitters across the dirt. Sitting up with a wry smile, he concedes defeat, admitting he couldn't succeed after all. He remarks that the seven magia never disappoint and that he still doesn't stand a chance against her. Maniana looks on, taken aback by his cheerful admission. She reflects on the fact that she was utterly bested by a 15-year-old boy. His talent, she thinks, is fearsome, yet he remains diligent, always striving to improve. She finds herself wondering just how powerful he will become when his abilities fully develop. As his small companion notes his struggle, the swordsman admits his heart was pounding so hard he couldn't focus. Maniana then approaches, extending a hand. She compliments his remarkable use of magic, but states that he has much to improve, and it would be a shame not to polish those skills. Her expression softens into a playful smile. She thinks to herself that while she was supposed to make amends, she's now getting butterflies. With a wink, she declares her intention to train him hard from now on, addressing him as Demonio. After Maniana insists on being called Master, she explains that she must keep the fact she took on a disciple a secret from the Night Order. Demonio's demeanor abruptly shifts to one of grave concern. He asks her bluntly if there's any chance she could be pregnant, reminding her they took no precautions. She responds with a sly chuckle and a wink, teasing that if that were the case, she might just have him take her as his wife. His face flushes as he grabs her hands, earnestly shouting, with pleasure. Taken aback by his sincerity, Maniana quickly clarifies that she was only kidding, suggesting he wouldn't want an old woman like her. His earnest acceptance left Maniana momentarily speechless, her cheeks flushing as she stared back at him, uttering a single, questioning word. She quickly turned away, explaining that he was a silly goose and that she had only been joking. She reassured him not to worry, as she had already handled the situation with contraceptive magic. He processed this, realizing that such erotic jargon had indeed come up in the game. He struggled to compose himself, while Maniana, walking ahead, felt a strange sensation and wondered what was happening to her. The feeling intensified, and she clutched at her chest, questioning if the aphrodisiac had truly left her system. And so, with their agreement made, Maniana secretly became his master at the main estate of the Tridal family. Within the estate, a noblewoman instructed a maid not to tell a soul about the new arrangement, remarking that she expected nothing less from Sir Demonio. She noted Maniana's renowned beauty and expressed her delight that she would be Demonio's master. Far below in the gardens, the two began their new partnership. His resolve firm, Demonio gathered a sphere of glowing energy in his hands, declaring that for the sake of his dear mothers, he would withstand any sort of rigorous training. She watched him, a blush creeping up her neck as she pointed out that the magic current near his chest was a bit off. He moved closer, taking her hand in his. He offered for her to try and sense his mana directly. The moment his hand made contact, a jolt shot through Maniana. She let out an involuntary cry, her body trembling from the sudden, intense sensation. He pulled back, flustered, reminding her that she shouldn't lose focus. He tried to dismiss the moment, insisting that this was just training, though his own reddened face betrayed his composure as he thought to himself what an intense session it was. An hour earlier, on a secluded, rocky shore, Maniana stood opposite the young man, known as Demonio. He channeled his power, a dark aura flaring around his bare torso. With a sharp cry, he clenched his fist, concentrating his strength. Unleashing the gathered force, he drove his fist into a massive boulder, shattering it completely on impact. He stood panting among the fragments of stone. From a distance, Maniana's voice carried over, acknowledging that he seemed to have grasped the technique. She praised him, impressed by his progress. Maniana explained that the technique, body enhancement, is a cornerstone of magic-based combat and a crucial secret. She stressed the importance of continuing his fundamental training, silently noting that his rapid learning was exactly what she expected from him. He readily agreed to her instruction. Internally, he affirmed his new reality. Maniana had become his master. Their training progressed to sparring. As he lunged with his blade, Demonio reflected that for someone he thought would only teach him aggression, Maniana was a surprisingly thorough and patient instructor. Parrying his strike, she was equally impressed, recognizing his natural talent after having faced many shadow users before. As their blades clashed, she observed how quickly he was absorbing her lessons on swordsmanship and body movement, like a sponge. She had never encountered anyone who could command their shadow with such meticulous control. A confident smirk played on her lips. She concluded that he was already stronger than she had been as a teenager, a truly fearsome prospect. The intense training left him breathing heavily, sweat glistening on his toned physique, yet his expression remained one of unwavering determination. As the training continues, Maniana's face flushes, a bead of sweat tracing a path down her temple as she shudders. Standing behind him, she places her hands on his abdomen and instructs him to focus, to put force into his core. She explains that while the method is perilous, it is the fastest way to increase his mana. She will channel her own into him, forcing his body to acclimate to its high density. With a slight blush, she adds a warning that the process might be a bit too stimulating for him. A jolt runs through his body, his expression a mixture of shock and exertion. He stammers, his face flushed, admitting that the contact with her chest is indeed incredibly stimulating. Leaning in close, she whispers in his ear that he cannot afford to be immobilized by such slight stimulation. She reminds him that some enemies might use their charms to make him lower his guard. He forces himself to agree, internally repeating that this is proper training and he must remain focused. His hand trembles, betraying his struggle for composure. The struggle intensifies. He questions his own reactions, feeling his control slipping away. Gritting his teeth, he commands himself to stay rational, to endure this serious training. At the same time, Maniana feels her own body tingling, the woman within her unable to suppress her desire for him. In stark contrast, he desperately tries to clear his mind, to embrace a state of nothingness. Sometime later, the small, round companion watches from a distance as he carries an exhausted Maniana on his back. The creature floats in confusion, wondering what kind of training could have possibly led to this outcome. As they walk toward a grand building, he reflects on their master-disciple relationship, believing it to be very good. He feels he has successfully avoided the bad fate destined for Maniana, at least for now. Yet, a sense of caution tempers his relief. He knows he cannot afford to be optimistic. He sits at the dining table with Maniana, lost in thought. He resolves that the only thing he can do now is become stronger. Noticing his distraction, Maniana asks if he is even listening. He explains his reasoning, voicing his concern that since the plot has strayed so far from the source material, there is no telling how the game will play out from this point on. Maniana looks up, surprised by his sudden seriousness. His intensity quickly turns to embarrassment as he apologizes, accidentally addressing her as Mama Maniana. Flustered, he waves his hands frantically, trying to retract the statement and insisting it was just a slip of the tongue. Maniana, however, responds with a warm, gentle smile. She reaches out to pat his head reassuringly, telling him that she doesn't mind being called Mama. In fact, she adds, she would love to have a brilliant and cute son like him. This tender exchange does not go unnoticed. From a nearby doorway, Rosa Tridal peeks into the room, her eyes wide with shock as she witnesses Demonio and Maniana laughing together. Her shock quickly morphs into a possessive jealousy. A new path has just been unlocked. As she clutches her necklace, a single thought consumes her. But I'm his mama. Outside the grand estate, Maniana and a shirtless Demonio conclude a training session amidst a rocky landscape. Later, Demonio enters the mansion, wiping sweat from his neck and remarking on his fulfilling training. He is greeted by the warm smile of his stepmother, Rosa, who observes that he seems to be working very hard. He credits his progress to his master's excellent tutelage. Rosa adds that the soldiers have been telling her how he's been learning one powerful spell after another. She gently warns him that he'll catch a cold if he remains sweaty, then startles him by suddenly grabbing his arm and insisting he hurry and take a bath. Propelled by her insistence, he dashes down the hall completely undressed, wondering what just happened, leaving his clothes discarded in a heap behind him. Once he is gone, Rosa picks up his vest. She closes her eyes and brings the fabric to her face, inhaling deeply and recognizing the familiar scent of Demonio. Her expression instantly sours. She realizes it is not his scent alone. Mixed with it is the scent of what she perceives to be a lascivious, mature woman. Meanwhile, Demonio soaks in a large, steaming bath, letting out a relaxed sigh. He is not alone in the water. Maniana, in her small, fairy-like form, asks him to rub her back. He looks at her tiny body and questions the request, asking where her back even is. His question is interrupted by the sound of the bathroom door creaking open. A pair of bare female legs steps inside as Demonio turns his head toward the sound, a look of surprise on his face. He stared in disbelief as the intruder revealed herself to be none other than his stepmother, Rosa. Wrapped in a towel, she smiled warmly and offered to wash his back for him, much to his shock. Before he could protest, she joined him in the water, insisting that as his mother, it was her role. She even declared herself his true mother, leaving him utterly overwhelmed by the situation. And so, he eventually surrendered to the moment, finding the warm water and care surprisingly pleasant. His life became a whirlwind of intense nurturing and rigorous training. His devoted stepmother, Rosa, prepared lavish meals to strengthen his body, while his great and mighty master, Maniana, constantly pushed his spirit, questioning his resolve. Their methods were unconventional. Rosa insisted that a son is supposed to sleep with his mother, while Maniana framed it as a necessary trial to build his resistance against seduction. Both women, he realized, were blessing him with their unique forms of service. And so, his days were filled with relentless practice, honing his physical abilities and magical defenses under Maniana's watchful eye. As the seasons came and went, his skills grew exponentially. He sparred with his master, awakened a formidable dark power, and eventually stood ready to face monstrous beasts. He unleashed the full might of his shadowy magic, forming a monstrous maw of darkness that lunged forward and completely consumed the creature's head with a sickening crunch. Having completed his grueling tutelage, the day finally arrived. Dressed in a sharp new uniform for his first day at the academy, he turned to his two mothers with a confident smile, announcing his departure. They saw him off with pride. Rosa, with a warm smile, wished her dear son to take care. Maniana, ever the master, reminded her best disciple not to go overboard at the academy. He stood ready to depart, clad in the dark, formal uniform of the academy. His two mothers, Rosa and Maniana, watched him go, with Maniana beaming, her eyes sparkling with pride. Despite his composed exterior, he was flustered by their heartfelt send-off, clutching his head as he admitted to himself that he would miss them dearly. Moments later, seated inside the carriage, his small companion floated beside him and asked if it was finally time. He confirmed quietly as the carriage lurched forward, its wheels beginning to turn. As the journey began, his demeanor shifted. He reflected on the fact that his enrollment in the academy marked the beginning of the Mama Fan main story, a plot he knew would lead to his beloved mothers being treated horribly. A dark, determined grin spread across his face. He made a silent vow. He would turn everything on its head. In the heart of the training capital stands the Noblessum Magic Academy, a prestigious institution considered one of the finest in the country. Within its halls, a new class of students is welcomed. An announcer congratulates them on their enrollment, reminding them that this elite school, attended by royalty and nobles, has produced many esteemed members of the Knights Order and the Ministry of Magic. An instructor then addresses the assembled students, explaining that they will all take entrance exams to determine their class placements. He offers a word of caution. This year's exams have spiked considerably in difficulty, and they must do their utmost. The exams begin with a magic appraisal. When Demonio, Tridal, takes his turn, the appraisal crystal shatters under the sheer force of his power. Following this, he sits for the written test, focused and composed. During the practicals, a rival student, declaring himself the eldest son of the noble Carmes family, unleashes an intermediate fire spell, Blaze Arrow, vowing not to lose. Demonio, however, effortlessly parries the attack during the swordsmanship portion of the exam. He counters with overwhelming force, casting an advanced black magic spell, Black Fawn. The other students watch in disbelief, recognizing it as the sort of magic employed by the Knights Order. Watching from the sidelines, a bead of sweat rolls down Monica's face. She murmurs to herself about his incredible strength, admitting that while she had heard he was a genius, She never could have imagined he was this powerful. His performance solidifies his reputation. Standing before the results, Demonio sees his name at the top. First place, Demonio Tridal. His grades are top-notch, befitting an elite from a distinguished noble family. His small companion floats beside him, questioning why he came to this deserted place. A memory surfaces, a younger version of himself, bursting with joy, running to announce his success. He shouts for Mama Rosa and Mama Maniana, proudly declaring that he got first place in his first exams. In the present, the two women receive the news. Maniana sips her tea, stating calmly that it's what she'd expect from her disciple. Rosa, however, clasps her hands together, beaming with pride as she congratulates him, exclaiming, "That's my son for you." She and Rosa beamed with pride, their faces pressed against the window, radiating an almost blinding aura of maternal joy. Their display left Demonio flustered, his face flushed as his small companion looked on. He recalled their parting words. Maniana, sipping her tea, had mused about the academy, suggesting she might try attending next time, as she wanted to keep an eye on her daughter anyway. Rosa, holding a small doll in his likeness, offered a gentler sentiment, telling him to feel free to come home should anything become too difficult. Remembering their support, he turned and walked toward the academy grounds, his back to the past. He clenched his small fists, steeling his resolve with a quiet affirmation that he needed to give it his all. His determination, however, soon soured into frustration. He had been placed in Class C. With a grimace, he realized that this was it, the true beginning of the story. As he walked, he overheard the laments of other students. One, covering his face in shame, despaired over being placed in Class D and having to face his parents. His companion tried to console him, pointing out that at least he was better off than those in even lower classes. His small companion, floating beside him, looked up in confusion and asked about the meaning of these classes. Demonio explained plainly that it was a system of hierarchy. The academy, a sprawling and magnificent structure, operated as a strict meritocracy. Students were sorted into classes from A to E, their placement determined entirely by their academic performance and grades. This system created a stark divide. Upper-class students received all manner of preferential treatment, while those in the lower classes were forced to study in inferior conditions. Because students could change classes based on their performance, everyone fought desperately to climb the ladder, even by a single rank. His companion remembered that in the original story, Demonio was an A-class student, the unrivaled top of his year. It buzzed with excitement, exclaiming that this meant he could do whatever he wanted and eagerly asked what mischief he was planning. Demonio flatly denied any such intentions. He clarified his position, stating that he had no desire to become an outcast and follow a path to ruin. However, he admitted that he did intend to follow the game's events to some extent. His companion seemed to understand his carefully considered plan. He walked along the paved path of the academy grounds, his small companion floating beside him. The creature observed that he had gone easy on his opponents during the earlier exams. He confirmed this, explaining that he didn't want to attract any unwanted attention. Just as in the game he knew, it was better to maintain a low profile and present himself as merely an average elite. His companion teased him, pointing out that even while holding back, he still managed to secure first place. Demonio looked away, reflecting that a full year had passed since he was reincarnated into this body. Through intense and diligent training, he had awakened the dormant talents hidden within his new form. Despite this progress, he knew he couldn't rest easy. To truly turn the fate of this world on its head, he understood that he needed even more power. Meanwhile, inside the grand halls of the academy, two students gossiped in hushed tones. One mentioned that a commoner had enrolled this year, and that the existence of that guy concerned him. His friend reacted with surprise, asking if the commoner was truly competent. The first student confirmed he had seen him at the exam venue, describing him as bad news. He then dismissed the threat, clarifying that while the commoner possessed monstrously good sword skills, he was an E-class and couldn't even use magic. In an office elsewhere in the Noblesse Magic Academy, an instructor with a large witch's hat reviewed student files. She mused that there were many amusing students this year, but two stood out. The prodigy of the Tridal family, whose exam results were incredible, but whose full strength remained a mystery, and a commoner who couldn't use magic. The witch-hatted instructor remarked that with a trouble kid and a maverick, the head teacher would have their work cut out for them. In response, Maniana, holding a riding crop, declared she would take it upon herself. With a sharp crack of her crop, she vowed to discipline both of them and drill the academy's code into them until they became obedient. Inside the classroom designated IA, Demonio's presence casts a palpable chill. His fellow students whisper amongst themselves, remarking on his terrifying face and the dark rumors that follow him. His small, floating companion observes the scene, noting that Demonio's reputation for being hated is only growing, even in the capital. Despite the fear he inspires, a group of female students boldly approaches his desk. One, a longtime admirer, expresses her honor at being in the same class. Another quickly suggests they have a private magic lesson together after school, trying to gain an advantage over the others. He remains utterly still and silent. His companion floats beside him, processing the scene. It realizes that for every person who fears Demonio, there's another who is drawn to the power and notoriety he commands. The companion glances over at Demonio, its own expression twisting into shock at the sight of his face. A perfect, unnerving blend. His complete lack of reaction sends a clear message. The companion notes his disinterest in the young women, while the students themselves, flustered, decide it's best to return to their seats. Suddenly, the chatter is cut short by a sharp crack as a teacher's pointer slams down on a desk, a clear command for order. The source of the command is a formidable woman standing at the front of the room. She introduces herself as Gloria, the homeroom teacher for the class this year. The small companion recognizes her instantly, crying out her name internally. Mama Gloria. It recalls her reputation as a stern, elite knight and professor. However, it also realizes something is wrong. In the original story, Gloria was never the protagonist's homeroom teacher. She begins her inaugural address, acknowledging that while the nobility are generally well-bred and talented in magic, talent alone is pointless. With a fierce look, she declares that it is entirely up to them whether they hone their skills or let them die. Her voice booms with passion. As their new teacher, she vows to forbid any arrogance. Under her watch, the weak will become strong, and the strong will be pushed to aim for even greater heights. She bellows at the stunned classroom, demanding to know if her intentions are clear. The students sit in rigid silence, intimidated by her overwhelming presence. Turning away, she reflects on their reaction. She had only unleashed a tiny bit of her magic, yet it was enough to cow them. She concludes that A-class nobility isn't what it used to be, finding them all rather amateurish. Her thoughts are cut short as a sudden, intense gaze from the back of the room catches her attention. Her eyes widen in surprise and alarm. The piercing stare belongs to Demonio Tridal. Another student feels a chill as his eyes seem to scan her body, but Gloria recognizes the look for what it is. As a veteran professor, she can tell it's the gaze of someone looking down on their instructor, provoking her with a silent assertion that he has nothing to learn from her. Outside the Grand Academy building, a silent understanding passes between them. Demonio looks forward to their future encounters, while Gloria internally vows to discipline him thoroughly. Later, while walking through the Academy's halls, his small companion asks if he has seen everything in the Academy during his previous life. He replies that he hasn't, explaining that he only ever visited the locations specified by the game's progression. He spots the cafeteria below and points it out. He admits to his companion that while he knows the named characters from the game, he doesn't recognize most of the students around him. His gaze settles on two girls. He identifies one as Sakura from the Easter Island country, and the other as Tina, an international student from the land of the elves. When his companion asks about their characteristics, he simply notes that their mothers are cute. As a tray of food is suddenly knocked over nearby, he recalls that both girls were conquerable heroines in the game. He remembers they had explicit scenes, but he skipped all of them, finding no interest in such things. The disruption comes from a male student berating one of the heroines. He shouts that a lowly J-rank laggard like her should eat in a corner by herself, not shamelessly in the middle of the table. The girl stands her ground, demanding to know what he just said, as other students look on. He stepped forward, his polished shoe stopping just short of the spilled meal. With a tone of mock regret, he remarked what a shame it was, as he had yet to try that particular dish. The girl, her face a mask of fury, glared up at him. Just then, another student arrived on the scene. Demonio's eyes narrowed, a predatory grin spreading across his face as he recognized the newcomer, the game's protagonist. He also identified the girl as Rebecca, one of the main heroines of Mama Fan. The newly arrived student stood firm, his voice clear and steady as he declared that he did not approve of wasting food. The determined eyes of a young man with light-colored hair scan the area. He is being watched from a distance by a shadowed figure. From a balcony overlooking the hall, the masked swordsman observes the students below, noting with a slight smirk that the boy has finally shown up. His small, floating companion asks about the boy. The swordsman identifies him as Ray Brave, explaining that he is the protagonist of the original game. He then adds with a sudden, intense glare that Ray is also a fearsome Lilicon bastard, shocking his companion. Down below, a group of students confronts Ray, their leader dismissing him as a lowly E-class swine. The companion questions the swordsman's accusation, pointing out that Ray is a teenager himself. The swordsman retorts that Ray only goes for teenagers, cementing his label as a hardcore Lilicon. The bully continues his taunts, laughing that he heard Ray can't use magic at all. He declares that a no-talent peasant has no right to defy the nobility. Ray's expression hardens as he clenches his fist. He draws his sword, stating that his lack of magic doesn't matter. At this point in the story, Ray is a laggard, a character who can only fight using his swordsmanship. Watching from above, the masked swordsman thinks cynically that despite Ray's grandstanding, his magic will awaken soon. Unaware, Ray shouts his vow to crawl to the top of the academy and prove that even laggards can best geniuses if they try hard enough. A torrent of ancient magic then erupts from Ray. As the descendant of a legendary hero, he is capable of learning such powerful arts. The swordsman dryly notes how Ray's heroic speech about being a laggard fits perfectly for someone from a peerless bloodline, leaving his companion utterly confused. The masked swordsman and his companion discuss the grim reality of his former in-game persona, Demonio. He explains that in the original story, Demonio loses badly to the protagonist mid-game, is ruined, and ultimately dies a miserable death. His companion asks if this means the protagonist, Ray Brave, is destined to save the world, to which the swordsman grimly confirms. He knows in his head that to avoid this death route, it would be best to avoid antagonizing the protagonist and instead build amicable bonds. Considering the menacing foes they will eventually have to fight, Rei is a valuable combat asset. But despite this logic, he clutches his chest, overwhelmed by the raw emotion of it all. He simply cannot bring himself to forgive him. A memory surfaces of his past life. As a young man, he sat before a computer screen, watching a scene with the game's heroine, Rebecca. She confessed to feeling lonely, a sentiment he shared, thinking he would also be alone if he went home. In that moment, the game presented him with a choice: part ways with her and return to the dorm, or stay with her until dawn. His hand trembled as he moved the cursor toward the latter option. His past self slammed the desk in frustration, deciding against it to avoid getting in trouble. Back in the present, the masked swordsman descends a grand staircase, gritting his teeth. He resolves to steer clear of the protagonist as much as possible to protect his own mental state, fearing Rei's cloying nature would rub off on him. Elsewhere, the recently defeated bully and his cronies pick themselves up, swearing revenge on Rei Brave. Rei, however, stands unfazed as Rebecca approaches him. She compliments him, saying he doesn't disappoint, prompting him to ask what's wrong. He suddenly looks up, having sensed a strong, frustrated bloodlust. The feeling emanates from the masked swordsman, who glares down at him from a balcony above, his eyes glowing with an intense, barely contained fury. The swordsman reflects on the game's timeline. If events proceed as they should, this is the point where the protagonist is meant to meet the young women and deepen his bonds with them. An hour later, within the walls of the Grand Academy, a class is in session. The instructor, Gloria, stands before the class and asks if anyone recognizes the complex incantation written on the chalkboard. From the back of the room, the masked swordsman's hand shoots up as he confidently declares, yes. He stands and provides the correct answer, identifying it as the magic sequence of Zoltak, advocated by the Julius Magic Association. Rei Brave, sitting nearby, is shocked by his classmates' focus and knowledge. The swordsman, however, simply thinks to himself that he is concentrating intently, just as any student should. His perfect performance left Gloria gripping her pointer, flustered. He had mastered all of her material, down to his diligent posture in class. Her small companion, however, was thrilled, shouting its approval and readiness for the next challenge. She sat with a confident smile, declaring that Mama Gloria's lessons were exceptionally fun. She glared back, demanding to know what the traitor Demonio was trying to pull. His outward confidence masked an internal conflict. Looking out the window, he considered the difficulty of balancing his actions. Becoming a hated troublemaker was the last thing he wanted, as deviating too far from the original plot would render his knowledge from his past life useless. Elsewhere on the academy grounds, two of his classmates, Carol and Mina, found themselves in a tense situation. They were being confronted by two older students. The red-haired one, Greb, sneered at the first years, telling them they wouldn't get off easy for spilling coffee on his shoes. The girls insisted they had already apologized, but his companion simply smirked and told them to come along. He leaned in closer, his voice menacing. He reminded them of who he was and warned that defying him would lead to their expulsion from the academy. With false reassurance, he added that he wouldn't harm them. From a short distance away, the confrontation had not gone unnoticed. Rei Brave's companion remarked that Greb seemed to enjoy picking on first-year girls, wondering if he planned to use them as playthings until they broke. He mused that Greb's parents must be exhausted from cleaning up his messes. Rei Brave confirmed his intention to intervene, stating simply that they were his classmates. From a classroom window above, the masked swordsman and his companion watched the scene unfold. The small creature turned to him, asking if he was going to save them too. In response, he leaped from the window with a fierce expression. His companion called the action rude, but he thought to himself that while he had zero interest in the girls, he wanted to make his mothers proud. The true essence of filial piety, he mused, was something to be understood through Maniana. Demonio lands with a sudden thud, crouching between the bullies and his classmates. Carol calls out his name in surprise, while Greb looks on, startled by the abrupt intervention. His arrival sends a ripple of disbelief through Greb's companions. One of them recognizes the name, identifying him as the infamous demon of the traitor family. Another asks if this is truly the student who ranked first among the first years. Greb, attempting to project confidence, tells his friends to relax, dismissing Demonio as just a first year, regardless of his genius. From his position, Demonio observes the group, noting that they are third years from Class A and surmising that a strict seniority hierarchy governs the academy. He offers a polite apology to the seniors. Internally, however, he recalls the events of the original game, where this same bully had gained notoriety by brutally beating anyone who angered him, including upperclassmen, from the very beginning of the school year. Continuing his deferential act, he bows deeply. He explains that the girls are his classmates and offers to compensate for their actions, pleading for their forgiveness. Greb watches him with an amused, condescending smirk. He resolves to lower his head as much as necessary, having no desire to become a conceited villain. From a distance, other students observe the scene, remarking that his submissive behavior is exactly what they expect and dismissing him as a simple whim. In a sudden, violent motion, Greb lashes out, kicking Demonio hard in the stomach. As he stands over the fallen Demonio, Greb wonders aloud if beating the top-ranked first year will make him famous. His friends watch, one admitting he feels bad for him, while Carol and Mina look on in horror. Greb scoffs at Demonio for not fighting back, calling him lame. He decides to let him off for the day, telling the first-year brat to go suck on his mom's tits. The insult triggers a terrifying change. In an instant, Demonio lunges forward, grabbing Greb by his uniform with crushing force. A dark, predatory grin spreads across his face as his eyes gleam with fury, and he repeats the bully's words back to him. "I should suck on my mom's tits, you say?" His grip tightened, lifting the bully effortlessly. Greb, his face contorted in disbelief, could only stammer at the monstrous strength holding him captive, wondering how much the dark-haired student had been holding back. The insult echoed in his mind, throwing him back to a memory from his youth. He was in bed, flustered, as his mother, Rosa, gently invited him to sleep beside her as he always did, reminding him that a son is supposed to sleep with his mama. She soon fell asleep, but sleep would not come for him. He lay tense and awake, tried to keep his distance in the bed. In her slumber, she rolled over, pressing against him. His eyes widened in panic, his breath catching in his throat. The proximity was overwhelming. He recoiled with a choked gasp, his mind reeling. Kneeling on the bed, he fought against his own body's reaction. He had to endure it, he told himself. He could not respond to his mother's innocent affection with lust. This was the daily torment Greb had so casually mocked. Snapping back to the present, Demonio unleashed his fury, hurling the bully through the air. As Greb crashed to the ground, Demonio roared, demanding if he had any idea how much he had to endure on a regular basis. His companions rushed to his side, helping the dazed Greb to his feet and retreating with threats of revenge. Demonio watched them go, his expression cold, before declaring that his mother's breasts are a holy thing and should never be spoken of with a filthy mouth. Nearby, Carol and Mina swooned at his display of power and conviction. They continued to fawn over him, much to his discomfort. Mina admitted she had no idea what his triggers were, while Carol remarked that she was surprised by this side of him, as if he were a completely different person than she'd imagined. As a result of the confrontation, Greb lay defeated on the ground. It was a significant victory, as he was known to be the third strongest student among the third years, a true powerhouse of the academy. News of his defeat spread like wildfire across the academy grounds. Whispers followed in the wake of the confrontation, confirming that Demonio, a first year, had not only fought but decisively beaten Greb, the third strongest student in the entire school. A palpable fear began to grow. He was an unbelievable scoundrel, someone not to be defied. Among the gossiping students, opinions were divided. One young man dismissed the rumors, finding it impossible that a brilliant student would say such things. His friend, however, leaned in to whisper the true cause. Greb had been talking about a woman's chest. Nearby, a group of girls swooned, recalling how incredibly cool Demonio had been when he threatened to permanently shut Greb's filthy mouth. Elsewhere, Ray Brave conferred with an academy elder, his own expression troubled. He worried that this incident would only worsen his own notoriety and began to question Demonio's motives, wondering aloud if the man planned to take control of the entire academy. The subject of his concern was, at that moment, kneeling before Professor Gloria. She had summoned him. Internally, he lamented his fate. Despite his efforts, he was still being treated as a trouble kid. He wondered if this was the unbendable power of fate from the game. Gloria looked down, her arms crossed, and declared that he had finally shown his true colors as an incorrigible child. She continued, stating that while she had much to say to him, Carol and Mina had already filled her in on the situation. She acknowledged that he had saved them from being picked on by senior students, which framed his actions as a form of self-defense. However, she made it clear that this context didn't mean she could simply dismiss what he had done. With that, she delivered his punishment. He was to run 20 times around the field. It was necessary, she explained, to set a good example for the others. He accepted without protest, simply apologizing and promising to be careful from then on. Her stern expression softened into a knowing smile. She told him he was an honest fellow, admitting that she had been mistaken about him. As a veteran professor, she could tell these things. She then reached out and gently patted his head, her smile remaining. He might be a trouble kid, she conceded, but he was definitely not a rogue. As she turned to leave, he rose to follow. A realization settled in his mind. This was exactly the same as in the game. While the other professors would treat him like a ticking time bomb, Mama Gloria was the only one who treated him normally, like any other student. He clenches his fist, his resolve hardening. He recalls Professor Gloria, remembering her as both kind and strict, the best professor he knew. That is precisely why he would be damned if he allowed her to face her fate alone. He knows what will happen. She will tell her companions to leave it to her, to press on, and then she will be left to die. With unwavering certainty, he vows that he will not let Mama Gloria perish. 1 month into the school year, Gloria gathers the first-year students at the mouth of a torchlit cavern. She announces their next activity. They will be split into groups of 5 to explore down to the 5th floor of the dungeon. Her voice rings with authority as she warns them not to underestimate the dungeon despite its low level. A moment of carelessness in real combat, she stresses, could cost them their lives. With a final command to stay on their guard, she sends them off. Gloria further explains that this dungeon exploration is a required extracurricular activity for all first years during their first term. However, while it is compulsory for the low-class students, participation is entirely voluntary for those in the high class. She notes that while students often explore dungeons for extended periods, even on holidays, no one from the higher classes chose to participate. Her gaze then lands on the sole exception, standing with his arms crossed. Demonio Tridor, the only participant from Class A. Gloria approaches him, questioning why he would do this solo without a group. She points out the vast difference in power between him and the other students, but he simply states that he doesn't mind. He lets out a large, indifferent yawn as other students wonder why the top-ranked student would bother with this activity. He had a single reason for taking part: to make sure he didn't get on Gloria's bad side. The true, unspoken reason flashes in his mind, a memory from another timeline. In the original game, Mama Gloria loses her life during this very extracurricular class. Meanwhile, deep within the dungeon, the other students are already in the thick of battle. Ray Brave, the game's protagonist, slices through a stone golem as his party members. Rebecca, Monica, and Sakura handle other threats and gather valuable crystals. Elsewhere, the masked swordsman dispatches a massive wolf-like beast with casual ease. From a distance, Gloria monitors the students' progress on a floating magical screen, her expression unreadable. The first day of the dungeon exploration concludes without any apparent issues, and night falls upon the cavern entrance. Suddenly, a panicked voice cuts through the darkness, shouting in alarm, "What?" Miss Gloria. She sits with her students on the 5th underground floor of the dungeon, where the sudden revelation that she has children has left them speechless. She calmly states that it shouldn't come as much of a surprise. To illustrate, she opens a locket, revealing a cherished image of her daughter, Gelda. She adds that the girl is turning 6 this year. A fond smile touches her lips as she describes Gelda as a lovely and well-behaved girl, musing that her daughter is nothing like her. Her rare display of warmth is not lost on Ray and Rebecca. Ray comments that he's been so swamped with work lately that he hardly gets to go home, showing a hint of understanding. She continues, explaining that she must leave her daughter in the care of servants, a choice that makes her feel she is causing the child to suffer due to her parental obligations. Determined, she announces her plan to take a long vacation after this class to go home, believing she must finally do something mother-like for the girl who has no one else. As she daydreams about taking her daughter to the market and the play she promised, Demonio listens from a distance. His small, winged companion calls out to him, sensing a shift in the air. The companion is suddenly struck by a dreadful feeling. Though she cannot quite place it, she has a powerful premonition that Gloria is going to die. Her premonition only confirms what he already knows. In the original game, Mama Gloria was known for setting up her own death flags, being a workaholic, taking her first day off in a long time, her family duty, and a promise to her daughter. She had triggered every single one. He recalls the grim timeline. The very next day, the leaders of an enemy organization would attack the dungeon. Their targets were the heroines, who held secrets within their lineages. As the students came under attack, Gloria would intervene. In that moment, she would put her life on the line to protect her students, shouting for them to leave it to her and go. And there she would die. He couldn't stop the tears as he recalled the funeral scene from his past life. On the screen of his memory, Gloria's daughter, Gelda, was bawling her eyes out in front of the coffin, crying for her mother. His grief hardened into resolve. He vowed to save her, one way or another, and to crush the stupid, cliched death flags that led to her demise. His thoughts turned to strategy as he walked with the other students. He had considered avoiding this extracurricular activity, but realized it was a prime opportunity. Letting the event play out to a certain degree would make it easier to lure the enemies into making their move, allowing him to counter them. As the others celebrated the chance to finally have a bath, he remained focused on his plan. They arrived at a building with separate entrances for men and women. One of the students expressed surprise that a dungeon would have hot springs, but another explained that the academy had apparently set it up for use in classes. As the boys prepared to enter, Rebecca pointed a stern finger at Ray Brave, warning him not to dare peep on them. She noted that the walls were a bit run down, and he stammered that he would. Her words triggered another memory for Demonio. He recalled with a jolt of panic that this was the night of the infamous peeping event from a game, where a wall breaks down and the girl's bath comes into full view. He realized the situation was bad. He would be dragged into the mess at this rate. He had to evade it at all costs. As an adult with common sense, the thought of seeing naked teenagers made his stomach churn. He turned and fled from the building. He ran until he was out of breath, finally stopping by a secluded, rocky pool. Catching his breath, he looked around, only to see the winged girl already submerged in the water, looking up at him in surprise. She remained in the water as he took in the scene. He realized it was a hot spring. A smile spread across his face. This was perfect, as he had wanted to take a bath anyway. He slipped into the warm, hazy water. As he relaxed, he noticed the winged girl beside him, also enjoying the bath. He let out a contented sigh, stretching in the soothing spring. He froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. In the steaming water before him was not the winged girl, but his instructor, Gloria, stretching languidly. The hot spring was known for its rejuvenating and stiffening effects, a fact that did little to calm his racing mind. As Gloria let out a gasp of surprise, his own thoughts screamed her name.